Shannon Kyle is 47. At the time she was hired to pen Gregg Wallace's autobiography, Life on a Plate, she was 35, says she was freelance, a single parent and living in a council flat. She signed a contract which stated that, quote, "The writer understands that Wallace enjoys a high public profile and that her obligations to him of loyalty and confidentiality are therefore of particular significance." In the only interview she's going to give, Ms Kyle describes Gregg Wallace's behaviour towards her in 2012 as revolting misogyny, predatory and sexual harassment. We put Ms Kyle's allegations to Mr Wallace's lawyers. They told us he specifically denies any sexual misconduct with Ms Kyle. We're going to play her interview in just a moment, and I want to let you know that parts of the conversation are sometimes graphic. Shannon Kyle told me that her decision to speak out on camera on Newsnight tonight has been one of the most difficult she's ever had to make. But she says she wanted to because she couldn't stomach what she called the minimising of Gregg Wallace's behaviour. Mr Wallace is one of the BBC's most high-profile presenters, hosting shows like MasterChef and Inside the Factory. The nature of my conversation with Shannon Kyle means that some of the language is sexually graphic. We thought it was important you heard her claims in full.
He had a very busy schedule filming for MasterChef at the time, so I just had to fit around whatever he was doing. I think it was in maybe the second or third interview he started to talk about his love life. He was dating lots of different women, and he started telling me about these dates, who the women were, where he'd met them, and then in very graphic details what sexual acts they had done together.
Can I ask for an example?
Yeah, there was lots of examples. He talked about spanking a lot. He also talked about one of his girlfriends on all fours in front of a mirror. He talked just in incredibly sexual detail, which at the time it was just so shocking because it was completely unnecessary for the book.
On one occasion, you went to his flat to interview him. Is that usual? Would you normally go to someone's home to carry out these kind of interviews before writing their book?
Yeah, I mean, you can do. You obviously have to get quite close to your author, and you meet them at a place that they're relaxed and comfortable in. So when he asked me to go to his flat, I didn't think there's anything particularly odd about that. When I arrived at his flat at the allotted time, when he opened the door, he was completely naked except for a towel around his waist. And I think he might have even said something to that effect. He said, "Oh, and so I said, "Oh, I'll come back later, you're not ready." And he said, "Oh no, I've just been to the gym, I've just had a shower, don't mind me." And then then he sort of took me into the living room, and I kind of said, "Well, look, can you just go and get dressed?" And I just felt pretty kind of uncomfortable at that point. So I sat on the sofa to wait for him. And then he disappeared, and then he came back and he said, "Oh, actually, my trousers that I need, I've left them there." And it was right, they were just folded behind the cushion that I was sat on. And at that point, I did actually even wonder, did he plant those? Is that, And then I kind of looked up, and then he dropped the towel. So I just...
In front of
me. And I had a notebook, so I just put it like this, and I just said, "Just go and get dressed." And then he did. He went off and got dressed.
And what did you think was going on?
Well, I mean, at that point, I thought, this is just a bit of a nightmare job, essentially. The deadline was so tight. We didn't have very much interview time together. I really had to make the most of it. And it was at that point that I thought maybe I should tell somebody, because this is obviously inappropriate behaviour. It's, making me feel incredibly uncomfortable. However, I'd signed a contract, and that was essentially an NDA. It's a non-disclosure agreement where you can't talk about anything, you can't tell anybody. And one of the very first clauses in the contract actually stated that the writer understands that Wallace enjoys a high public profile, and that her obligations to him of loyalty and confidentiality are therefore of particular significance. And also I was worried about losing the job because I'd given up other work for this job. So I thought to myself, you know, I'm just going to try and navigate this. We'll just try and push on through, see what happens.
How would you describe that behaviour of the towel and the towel dropping? Like, could it have been an accident?
I mean, it was definitely not an accident. I mean, I think it was planned. I think he planned to answer the door with just a towel, and I think he might have even planted those trousers next to me.
Why?
I mean, at the time I just thought he's just desperate for attention. You know, he'd been talking about wanting to meet someone, he'd been talking about, you know, like he'd been going to the gym and he was looking better and, you know, all this sort of thing. And so I just thought, oh, he's just, you know, kind of trying it on, really. I mean, obviously it was an extreme way to do that, but...
How would you describe how that behaviour made you feel?
Well, I mean, it was quite disgusting. I mean, it was, I felt quite vulnerable because I'm on my own in a flat with a man who's naked. And it was just highly unexpected. I mean, it was then I realised actually that, you know, the rumours that had possibly heard about him, and I think he just always had this sort of cheeky reputation or whatever, I realised this is something beyond that.
Are there other things that he said to you that took you aback?
Yes, he said several things to me actually, which I'd actually like to read out.
And you were able to read them out because you wrote these in an email to a friend. You told
right.
her what he had said to you.
Yeah, so they're contemporaneous notes because they were so shocking. You know, before I read it out, I just want to point out that, you know, when these words were said to me, they literally made my stomach curl. You know, I was literally just like, they're almost like little grenades, word grenades, you know, that I think are designed to humiliate. And I think that saying them aloud, you know, almost feels shameful. But I want to point out that I want to now pass that shame back to the person who actually said them. So this is what Gregg Wallace said to me in a restaurant. "If you won't let me sleep with you, would you lick my arse?" And after rejecting his advances, he said I should keep an open mind and he'd keep his knob clean next time. When I was out eating dinner with him one day, I had eaten mess for dessert. And while I was eating this, he suddenly asked me, "What would you think if I put some of the eaten mess you're eating on my willy then?"
Oh my God. So how did you react when he said those things?
Well, I mean, when he asked about the eaten mess, I actually said, "I think you look pretty stupid." I mean, what I really wanted to do was just push the eaten mess across the table and let it land in his lap and walk out and never see him again. It's just, I understood what was happening because I understood that, I mean, I've never come across this before because, you know, this is sexual harassment almost of a different genre, but it's like, you know, these little word grenades are designed to see my reaction. So I tried not to react. I tried to brush them off. I tried to laugh or change the subject. What
were you thinking they were? In your head, you weren't laughing?
Oh God, no. I mean, it was just really revolting and sickening. It wasn't attractive. It was obscene. It was, you know, obviously designed to cause discomfort of some sort.
Were there any other occasions similar to that?
We did this interview, and then when we stood up to say goodbye, he went in for this hug. His face was just right next to mine, and we're about the same height, and I just completely froze. And then he just kind of said right into my ear, "Go on, just give me a little kiss, just give me just a little one." And I just paused, and then, you know, he either let go or I kind of pushed him off a little bit, and then I just really quickly wanted to get away. I just said, look, I'm going now, and I was in tears. I left very quickly.
There may be someone listening to you, watching you right now, thinking that's the point at which you leave this job because it's not worth it.
Exactly.
What would you say to them?
For me to have stood up and gone, oh, you know what, he made this really awful pass at me, I don't want to have to navigate this anymore, I'm not doing it. That was, you know, that's the difficulty, isn't it? You know, I turned down other work, I was reliant on this income. Did I do that, or did I just, once again, push on through?
And after that, when you had left his flat and were in tears, was that the only time you say he touched you inappropriately?
No. There was another occasion in his sports car. He persuaded me to go out for dinner, and I made it very clear it was not a date, it was just a dinner for the interview. And he got a sports car that had been loaned to him and he wanted to use it to drive there, and I said I'd meet him there, but he insisted that it was just a very short drive. So got into the car, and then every time he was changing the gear stick, he would just give my thigh a rub or the knee, and it was just so kind of nonchalant. I was a bit like, oh my God, like, it's, you know, it's almost like I was making a fuss by saying, like, get off me, but I did. I kind of moved away and I said, just stop.
After that dinner, when you'd carried on interviewing him, you got back into that sports car because he was going to give you the short lift home. What happened then?
So he started trying to touch my knee and my thigh again, and it was at this point I just lost my temper because I really had enough. I was so angry, and I said, if you touch me again, I think I said, I'll either hit or slap you. And he did. He stopped completely, and he didn't try it again.
One of the last interviews that you did with Gregg Wallace for the book was in Birmingham. He was appearing at the Good Food Show. What happened there?
Yeah, so after he had appeared on stage, we did a short interview together in the hotel. And then after that, my brother, who lived in Birmingham at the time, came to pick me up. I saw my brother, turned to say goodbye, and then as I was either walking towards the car and he followed me, or just before I started walking, I could feel him touching me around my backside, and my brother saw it. And so when I got in the car, he actually said, I just saw him do that. And actually, out of everything that happened, that was the thing that was most mortifying and humiliating, because it was my younger brother who saw it. And I was just so sort of in a fluster. I just said, look, just put your foot down, just get out of here.
When the allegations about Gregg Wallace's inappropriate comments emerged last week, what did you think initially?
I actually thought, wow, this is a long time coming. I mean, I was just...
You'd been expecting it?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe that it's taken this long. I'd almost sort of completely given up hope that one day the reality would come out. It's like he's been, you know, shielded. You know, just that, you know, many ways the BBC have been complicit by making him this, you know, larger than life character. You know, I mean, the stuff he said to me, that isn't cheeky Barrow boy Cockney humour. That's revolting misogyny. And I think that for so long people have known this has been going on. They've turned a blind eye. They have not spoken out.
Why have you chosen to speak out now?
This has been one of the most difficult and testing and almost excruciating decisions that I've ever had to make. I'm a ghostwriter and an introvert. I mean, I sit at home and I write books for people. I don't like to be in the spotlight. I'm not being paid for this interview. I'm not going to do any more interviews. But I felt absolutely compelled to speak out, because if women don't speak out, this is why these men get away with it for years and years and years. When I heard some of the allegations, people started to say, these are just lewd comments. He's just a bit of a cheeky chappy. No, there's more to this. I'm a testament that there's more to this. And if I can't speak out as a middle-aged, middle-class woman that I am now, I wasn't back then, but I am now, then I'll never speak out. I've got 2 daughters and 2 nieces, and I want to be able to look them in the eye and say, I tried to do the right thing.
Gregg Wallace's lawyers have told the BBC that, quote, "It is entirely false that he engages in behaviour of a sexually harassing nature." What do you say to that?
Well, it's not true. I mean, that's why I'm here, because I want people to hear the truth. And the fact is that he does sexually harass people and his behaviour is predatory. And hiding behind an act on MasterChef, I mean, how long can that go on for? I was there as his ghostwriter. I can only tell my story. And if it even shifts the dial even slightly and the culture that we seem to think is acceptable, then it'll be worth it.
The BBC says any behaviour which falls below the standards expected by the BBC will not be tolerated. They've pulled the 2 MasterChef Christmas specials in a change of heart from the BBC's earlier position. What do you think of how the BBC has handled this?
Well, I mean, again, the MasterChef episodes have only been pulled after there's been a bit of an outcry on social media. You know, I mean, I can only talk from my experience, but what I couldn't stomach was this minimising of his behaviour and trying to pass it off as something that's not aggressive or designed to humiliate, because it is.
And if Gregg Wallace was watching you now, what would you say to him?
I would say he needs help. I would say this has gone on for long enough. You know, can all these women be wrong? Is he the one that's right here? I actually can't bear the thought of him watching this. And probably, I mean, I have no idea what he's going to think of this. There's part of me that wonders if he'll even remember, because to him it was just like so natural to behave in this way, it seemed. So I would just say go and get help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, in a statement, Gregg Wallace's lawyers told Newsnight Mr Wallace has denied that he has engaged in any such behaviour, and he specifically denies any sexual misconduct with Ms Kyle. A BBC spokesperson said in recent days there's been concerning allegations made via the media about the alleged conduct of Gregg Wallace, many of which relate to shows made for the BBC. The production company Banner J UK launched a review because they have direct contractual relationship with Gregg Wallace. We'll provide whatever assistance we can to that investigation. And finally, if you want any support or help because of the nature of the conversation I just had with Shannon Kyle, please do contact the BBC Action Line at bbc.co.uk/action line, or you can call 0800 077 077.